Here.
Thank you.
Jay, can you hear me all right?
Clear as day, Mr. Mayor.
For some reason, if I lose coverage, will you resume the meeting and take over? I'm not expecting that to happen, but you never know.
I will be ready on standby in case the cell phone gods are cruel to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Thought I'd ask.
Yeah, you bet. No worries.
Sorry for interruption. This is the operator. We've now been joined by Glo Wolin. I am showing 1 minute to schedule start time. We do have another speaker dialing in. We currently have 4 participants in the conference. Do you want to start on time, or do you want to wait a few minutes to give time for more people to join?
Well, we'll wait for the 7th Assembly member to call in, the 3rd one that will be calling in, Taylor Norheim. I'm 5:59 right now, Chris, so we'll see what happens. If not, we'll start right after 6 o'clock, and he can
Taylor Norheim is just, and Phil Hofstetter has also joined us.
Mayor Jensen, we have a full assembly on the line.
Hey, Sigrid, don't do that. Just leave him over there for him to play. Let's just leave him over here.
Okay, we have a little background noise there. Sounds like some children playing. Sounds like fun. Anyway, it is 6 p.m. on Monday, March 22nd. This is a regular Borough Assembly meeting, and I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Would you like me to start the call first?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Chris. Yeah, give us a countdown.
Okay. I will start the conference in 5, 4, 3.
Okay, now we'll call the meeting to order. It's a regular Assembly meeting on March 22nd, 2021 at 6 p.m. I'll have the clerk please call the roll.
Chelsea?
Here.
Dave?
Here.
Jay?
Here.
Taylor?
Here.
Mark?
Here.
Jeff?
Here.
Bob?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a full assembly this evening. We have 3 members calling in, myself, member Stanton Greger, and member Norheim. The other 4 assembly members are in the assembly chambers. So with that being said, it's now time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That brings us to item 3 on the agenda, which is approval of minutes. There are no minutes for approval tonight. Item 4 on the agenda is amendment and approval of tonight's meeting agenda. If there are no amendments, I would entertain a motion to approve the meeting agenda.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay, no opposition. I guess there would have been an amendment if there was. That brings us to item 5 on tonight's meeting agenda, public hearings. There's a public hearing for Ordinance 2021-04. This is an ordinance amending Chapter 3.76, Administrative Officers and Appeals Process of the Borough Code to update the list of administrative officers to include the registered nurse contracted for Mountain View Manor Assisted Living and to update the title of the Mountain View Manor Director position. Are there any callers wishing to participate in the public hearing this evening?
There are not, Mayor Jensen.
Okay, with that being answered, the public hearing for Ordinance 2021-04 is now closed. There are no bid awards this evening. That's item 6. That brings us to item 7, persons to be heard related to today's agenda. Are there any people in the queue for Thompson? And I will let you do the timing and go down the list. So 5-minute limit for all the participants calling in, and the clerk will ring a bell once. If 4 minutes and 30 seconds, and then 5 minutes, bring it again, and you should wrap up for testimony. So thank you for calling up.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Chris, if you could please unmute John Murgis.
Hello, this is John Verkus.
Can hear you loud and clear, John.
Okay, thank you. I'm speaking for myself. I know the $8 million Scow Bay project is already on the bottom of your capital project priority list, but is it fair to the community to even have it on that list? The project is opulent, redundant, inadequately thought out, duplicates and competes with existing businesses, would likely never pass a current public vote, and would likely never get federal funding. Having that project on your list holds vessel owners and businesses hostage that are dependent on the Scow Bay turnaround. What's needed are simple maintenance and improvements 1/20th the size of the proposed $8 million project, tiny projects that would immediately benefit the revenue to the borough, that would would immediately benefit the Petersburg fleet and provide quick increases in sales tax revenue to the borough. Right now, such many projects are discouraged, right now, such many projects are, quote, non-starters, unquote, because they are perceived as discouraging the feds from giving Petersburg $8 million for a city boatyard. Commercial vessel owners don't want to wait for another 20 or more years to see some improvements to more safely and efficiently work on their commercial vessels at the Scow Bay site. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony this evening, Mr. Murgis. Clerk Thompson, will you please have the operator unmute the next caller?
Yes, Chris, please unmute Heather Kahn.
Heather Kahn, your line is now open.
Thank you. Hi, can everybody hear me?
I can hear you very clearly.
Okay. So my name's Heather Kahn, and I am talking under the communications. And I have a letter from Micah Hasbrook and then just a paragraph from myself. Micah is to the Petersburg Borough Assembly. I have consulted and collaborated with several people in our community about putting forth a non-discrimination ordinance for Petersburg Borough. We put our heads together and decided to base the language we put forth on the language in the charter of the city and borough of Juneau. The same language for Juneau was adopted by Sitka in 2016 and Ketchikan in 2020. Her inspiration for this proposal is because our community has honored Elizabeth Prodovich with a mural, and recently the Clausen Museum featured a beautiful piece on Petersburg's Amy Hollingstead. These women were influential and fought tirelessly for the issues of their times, yet Petersburg has no anti-discrimination language in its charter. What motivates her to put this forth is that she is a granddaughter of an illiterate Aleut woman who was an orphan, a child bride and widow before the age of 18. Her second marriage was an interracial arranged marriage to my grandfather, who was 20 years her senior. She had never met him and had no say in the matter. And thankfully, he was a decent man, and they had 8 children in a dry cabin in Kitchak. He died young and left her a widow, once again with 5 living children. There were times of unspeakable hardship, and she had to give her children away for a time to seek work. She was remarried and had 8 more children, and eventually the others all found their way back to her. Her life was hard and short, but she was a loving mother and dutiful wife. I speak to you in her honor because I can read and write, and I can choose my partner, and I can enter every business in this town, and my body is my choice. Although the issues of today are different than those in 1955, the fight is much the same in the 21st century. It is time for Petersburg to come together in kindness and respect to celebrate and support our diversity. I ask that the Assembly bring this proposal forward in ordinance form for all Petersburg past, present, and future. Please let me know how I can help make this happen. Micah Hasbrook. My letter is much the same. Micah and I are cousins, so that was about our great-grandmother. Our grandmother was an Aleut and born and raised in Kitchak, which was the home of Coffee Creek Cannery on the Bristol Bay side of the Aleutian chain. She was the oldest daughter of 16 children. She had an education up until 4th grade when she was needed at home to help her mother take care of the kids. Later, she had to work along with her parents to put food on the table for her family. My grandmother moved to Petersburg in the 1940s with her husband and 3 children, leaving behind 3 older kids. She later had 3 more children, one of those being my mother. Growing up in Petersburg in the 1950s and 1960s, my mother was too native to play with the white kids and too white to play with the native kids. She had lots of friends and family, but the hurt and cruelty of how she was treated along with her siblings and mother by some was unimaginable. This is just one example how the discrimination of race affected the lives of my family in Petersburg. I'm asking that we take this language and do what Juneau, Sitka, and Ketchikan have done in adopting such an ordinance for their people, their community. Petersburg has so many stories that can be told and heard from many in regards to discrimination. Our own town had signs posted back then to groups of people not welcome in many places still operating today. That's not the case right now. Yes, we have changed, but we can also change this for good. It can be its own. This is one thing that we, Petersburg, can come together on, something that can make a difference for everyone, and I encourage us to come together and make it right.
Thank you for your testimony this evening, Mrs. Khan, and we'll see where it goes from here. Clerk Thompson?
Yes, Chris, could you please unmute Ashley Kawashima?
Ashley Kawashima, your line is now open.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Kawashima, and I am also speaking in regards to my support of adopting the non-discrimination ordinance in Petersburg. I also worked in conjunction with Heather and Micah and Hilary Hunter to figure out kind of what we wanted to present. I'm a social worker and behavioral health clinician that served in our community for a number of years, as well as in Wyoming, Colorado, and Oregon, in communities that have non-discrimination ordinances. I believe that our local government should set an example and precedence for our community that discrimination will not be tolerated and that human beings deserve to be treated fairly and equally. As someone who regularly advocates for social justice and equality within both my job as well as my personal time, I can say for a fact that Petersburg is not an exception when it comes to populations of people being or feeling overlooked or feeling discriminated against in a multitude of ways, including when trying to access local resources, feeling safe going into businesses and establishments, or being provided equal opportunity for jobs and services. I believe if Petersburg implements this ordinance, that it will not only help to support equality and non-discrimination within our community, but also help to start important conversations moving forward of how we can work to continue improving positive community climate. And I also wanted to note that, like Heather and Micah had said, that multiple other Southeast Alaska communities have adopted almost this exact same ordinance, and I'm really excited that Petersburg could be next.
Thank you for your testimony this evening, Ms. Kawashima. Clerk Thompson?
Yes, Chris, could you please unmute Hilary Hunter?
Hilary Hunter, your line is now open.
Thank you. Everyone can hear me fine?
You're coming in clear on my phone.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. I'm speaking on the same topic. My name is Hilary Hunter. I'm a lifelong resident of Petersburg, even born in the hospital here. I've worked in many different areas, from the cannery to being an advocate for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault to working overseas as a Peace Corps volunteer. These cumulative experiences have opened my eyes to the everyday discrimination that still persists and the role of our bureaucratic systems in it. The ordinance that we bring forward for consideration today is based on one that has already been passed in Juneau, Ketchikan, and Sitka. In order to change the stories that occur on an everyday level that I am witness to and honestly am honored to be trusted with, we need to start with the systems that shape our community. By passing an ordinance that may feel like simply air and words at first, we can actually give people a tangible stepping stone to build off of and to protect themselves with when injustices happen. The legal system is messy and expensive, feeling inaccessible to many, but like a rung on a ladder to dredge yourself up out of the ocean. The first imperfect step is better than nothing. All of our community members and loved ones deserve to be respected, included, and protected. I have seen Petersburg come together to accomplish beautiful things, and I deeply value having a home that is capable of such deep caring and community. This space must be accessible to all of our community, not just a select few deemed worthy. We can create this place by making it clear that we value people on their ability to build and grow from wherever they are planted, not how homogenous they are. Alaska has a complex history and present. Humanity in general is complex. We have an impressive legacy in Petersburg left by activists Elizabeth Kratrovich and Amy Hollingstad, who tore down laws and signs that said no natives allowed. Honestly, I was shocked and ashamed to learn that we didn't already have an ordinance protecting our vulnerable communities from similar acts in 2021. By passing a non-discrimination ordinance, we can honor the work of those who came before us and signal to people at large that we, as a community together, strive to be a place where discrimination and hate are not our value. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony this evening, Ms. Hunter. Clerk Thompson.
Chris, if you could please unmute David Beebe.
David Beebe, your line is now open.
Hi, my name is David Beebe. I'm representing myself. I'd like to address the consequences of yet more legislation by Senator Murkowski exploiting the horrific history of genocide, racism, and discrimination perpetrated on Alaskan Natives. This legislation mandates privatization of public resources for the purposes of enriching Native corporate board members and shareholders. We all know how economic trickle-down theory has turned out for the majority of Americans and Alaskan citizens. ANCSA was premised on the assumption that settling Native land claims by decreeing 44 million acres and nearly $1 billion would provide Alaskan Natives the ability to reside in their own communities with sustainable economies. However, ANCSA's 50-year record in Southeast and elsewhere in the state has been an unmitigated social, cultural, environmental, and economic failure. Further, it mirrors the larger fiscal crises of the state of Alaska and the State of the Union. How did this happen in Alaska? It's very simple. It was accomplished by political fiat of an amazingly small collection of elected senators receiving unlimited and anonymous campaign contributions by imposing an economic fundamentalism for which, in the infamous words of Margaret Thatcher, there is no alternative. There is a term for this policy, and if you don't know what that term is, it has been described as the equivalent to the citizens of the Soviet Union not knowing what communism is. I'm talking about a policy model that seeks to transfer control of economic factors to the private sector from the public sector. It relies upon regressive tax policy and massive tax breaks to multinational corporations just like Sealaska and ConocoPhillips. In contemporary terms, that policy was declared by Steve Bannon to, quote, deconstruct the administrative state, and 2 decades ago by Grover Norquist to, quote, shrink government down to the size where it can be drowned in a bathtub, end quote. Well, if you don't know the name of this policy, it's only because it was intended that you not know. It's called neoliberalism. Alaskans now live that neoliberal nightmare, which was specifically meant to defund the social contract, eliminate public ownership of public resources, eliminate regulations to allow guaranteed corporate profit-taking, and outsource government functions to unaccountable and unelected corporate boards, again, who have no legal obligation other than to enrich their shareholders and themselves. A perfect example is the fact that the state of Alaska now owes oil companies millions of dollars for not drilling oil. How do we know the imposition of 50 years of neoliberalism is not working for all Alaskans? Well, most recently, the U.S. News and World Report came out with their exhaustive analysis ranking all 50 states using basic metrics to determine quality of life in each state. In terms of economic opportunity, Alaska ranked number 3 of all 50 states, 43 of all 50 states. In terms of public safety and education, Alaska ranked number 49. In terms of the state of economy, Alaska ranked dead last at number 50. In terms of the public corruption, in a different study by social scientists in 2013, Alaska ranked number 1. Alaska ranks at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to domestic violence, suicides, sexual and substance abuse, to name but a few of these horrors. The whole purpose of local government, as a last bastion of public process and democratic principles, is to represent people and to rectify the problems that they face, rather than pass the buck and perpetuate the problems. Please do not pass the buck and take a stand. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony this evening, Mr. Thompson.
Mayor Jensen, I believe that is all the callers.
Okay, that brings us to item 8 on this evening's agenda. Are there any callers, any persons to be heard on items unrelated to tonight's agenda?
There are not.
Okay, those 2 items are closed. Time for item 9, board, commission, and committee reports. There are none this evening. There is 1 item on the consent agenda, and I would entertain a motion to approve the renewal application from the bottle shop for a liquor license.
Move. I second.
Okay, any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Bob?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jeff? Yes. Mark?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the application for a liquor license renewal by the bottle shop passes unanimously. There are no report of other officers this evening, so that brings us to the mayor's report, and it's fairly short this evening. Alaska Natives Without Land legislation. Alaska federal delegation plans to reintroduce the landless native legislation soon. Comments and questions regarding the transfer of ownership of federal lands and infrastructure to the Southeast Alaska Native communities that were not included in the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, ANCSA, may be emailed to assembly@petersburgak.gov. A copy of Senate Bill 4891, which was introduced in the 116th Congress but failed to move to a vote of Congress before the end of the last session, is on the Borough website for public viewing, along with maps of the federal lands selected for transfer to Haines, Ketchikan, Petersburg, Chiniki, and Wrangell. Seeking letters of interest. The Assembly is seeking letters of interest from borough residents who wish to serve the community by filling a vacant seat on the following board and commissions until October 2021 municipal election. Planning Commission, there's still 1 vacant seat. Public Safety Advisory Board, still 2 vacant seats. Letters of interest should be submitted to Clerk Thompson at the borough office located at 12 South Nordic Drive, or by mailing to Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska 99833, or by emailing to dthompson@petersburgak.gov. I would like to mention, for the people that haven't heard, the EOC today has lowered the alert level for COVID to yellow in Petersburg today, which is great news. To see the protocols for this level, go to the borough website and go to the COVID section. In a phone conversation today with the clerk, she mentioned that it was her anniversary today. It was 16 years. And she has served the Petersburg municipality for 16 years, the city, and now the borough. And I'd like to thank her for her dedicated service. And with that being said, sorry, Debbie.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen.
Anyway, that is my report for this evening. And if there are no questions, I'll turn it over to the manager for his borough manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Parks and Rec has finished up a lifeguard class. If folks in town are interested in that and missed this one and like to join us for summer lifeguarding, please contact Stephanie Payne at Parks and Rec. Our borough buildings have reopened to face-to-face public access, thanks to the community for taking the necessary steps to rein in the recent outbreak. With the increased vaccination rate and following the safety protocols, we hope everything can maintain in an open status for all of us. Harbor staff has been working with the U.S. Corps of Engineers, setting up logistics for the South Harbor dredge sampling as required by EPA. The plan is to use the results of those dredge spoil study so that we can do in-water disposal of the dredge spoils. They're planning their work for the end of April and will take about 9 months to complete this testing of soil samples at their lab in Vicksburg, Mississippi. At this point, the dredge project has been pushed to the fall-winter of 2022. The harbor had our backflow preventers tested and serviced in early March. They'll be scheduling replacement of any compromised units by early May in preparation for our tour ship landings. Our tour ship calendar continues to change. I think when I typed this up, it was at 84. It's now down below 65. Cruise line agencies Lindblad with Seabird and Sea Lion, and American Cruise Lines and Alaska Dream Cruises and Allen Marine are all who continue to talk about coming here, but are still concerned about the COVID pandemic. Orion Associates is making good headway on design of the sewer main and manhole replacement on Ira 2 Street. And Rock and Road has delayed their startup on the Scow Bay Pump Station project until the weather clears a little bit. It was late March and looks like it'll be first part of April at this point. The new automatic read or AMI meters have been received for outfitting all of the single phase meters in the Middle and South Harbors. Our staff at Power and Light will begin the installation process on those this spring. CEPA reports that GCI successfully retrieved their fiber optic cable from over the top of the submarine cables. The replacement submarine cable for the CEPA transmission at Petersburg will be built and begin acceptance testing before the end of March. On March 10th, Chris attended an applicant's briefing held by the State of Alaska Department of Emergency Management. This is a required step for potentially receiving FEMA grant funding for repairs to the culvert and slope that failed at the public works site due to the heavy rains in December. The next step in the process will be coordinating a field visit with FEMA representatives, which will probably take place in late April or early May. Local engineering firm Orion Associates has begun design work necessary for grant finalization and for the procurement phase of the project. The FY22 motor pool budgets have been provided to all user departments, and those are being reviewed. Contract documents for the motor pool shop repairs are being finalized, and construction should begin in the next couple of weeks. We had a little bit of shorthanded in sanitation for a couple of weeks due to some staff vacation. We do not anticipate any issues with garbage or recycling collection during this time. Despite Liz's best attempts at forestalling the inevitable, Joe Bertinoli has announced his retirement from the borough. We will sincerely miss the dedication, sense of humor, and counsel he brings to the borough. We wish him a very happy retirement. The American Rescue Plan was signed into law. The legislation includes several provisions of interest to residents, including a $1,400 stimulus payment, new assistance program for food service businesses, extension of unemployment benefits, additional funding for the municipality, and extension of several existing programs and tax credits. More information as it becomes available will be posted to the borough's webpage listing resources for businesses and individuals impacted by COVID. We had a few maintenance issues at Fire Station 1. The apparatus bay door spring broke in November, making opening the door difficult. A repair attempt last week was started, only to discover the parts sent were not suitable for our door. The floor drain in the apparatus bay plugged. Brian and Josh attacked it and were able to clear the drain, and parts are reordered on the door. All volunteer branches are approved for in-person training as long as community risk stays below the red and they follow the volunteer fire department mitigation plan and borough policies. Debbie, Becky, and others are continuing to work with the vendor on changing to a new agenda management software and archival process. The new software looks really good, but the changeover process is very time-consuming. Department budgets were due from the directors last week, and Jody and I will begin our review process once this is completed. Meetings will be scheduled with the Assembly following the previously published budget calendar. Members of the community, the Assembly, local media, and staff were able to attend a Zoom echo call sponsored by the EOC, led by Dr. Ann Zink and members of her staff. The state officials reviewed the most recent Petersburg outbreak and discussed ways in which the borough could react in the future if another outbreak occurs. The biggest takeaway was recognizing that increasing our vaccination rate has the highest upside to controlling the virus. Petersburg continues to do well in this area, but we are still under the 70 to 80% vaccination rate target. Chief Kerr completed a Petersburg roadshow to interview some potential police officer candidates. Rather than bringing the candidates to Petersburg for initial testing, he traveled to them, thereby reducing the risk of bringing COVID back to the community. Some very good candidates were interviewed and tested. More information to follow. And Public Works, working with OBI Seafoods, will again close off the U-turn area near where OBI employees will be lining up to enter the plant. This is a safety precaution during the processing season. Public Works will work with OBI management to schedule the timing of this change. And that's it, unless there's questions.
Thank you, Manager Giesbrecht. Are there any questions from Assembly members of the manager and his report? Hearing none, thank you, Steve. That brings us on to unfinished business. And ordinances for second reading is the only item under unfinished business. This is Ordinance 2021-04, an ordinance amending Chapter 3.76, Administrative Officers and Appeals Process of the Borough Code to update the list of administrative officers to include the registered nurse contracted for Mountain View Manor Assisted Living and to update the title of the Mountain View Manor Director position. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this, approve this in its second reading.
So moved. Second?
Is there any discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Chelsea?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Ordinance 2021-04 passes unanimously in its second reading. Item 15, new business. Sampling of South Harbor dredge materials. To further the previously approved Petersburg Navigation Improvements Project, South Harbor Dredging, in partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, USACE will be in Petersburg the later part of April to perform sample testing of dredge materials. Rock and Road Construction proposes to supply the necessary equipment and crew to complete the project for an amount not to exceed $46,730. Expenditure of these funds is considered in kind for the project, so the Corps of Engineers will match the funds expended by the borough for use on future project expenses. I'd entertain a motion to approve this expenditure to Rock and Road Construction.
So move. Second.
I think there was a motion and a second. Any discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Dave?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes. Okay, well, did that complete the vote, Clerk Thompson?
Yes, it did.
Okay, that passes unanimously then, so that award will go out to Rock and Road Construction of Petersburg. Next item on the agenda is a mobile column lift system. Public Works Director Cotta recommends the purchase of a 4-column mobile vehicle lift system for the motor pool department. The lift system will facilitate the safe elevation of larger trucks for maintenance purposes. A recommended $54,000 for this purchase was approved by the Assembly in the fiscal year 2021 budget. Vehicle Service Group quotes $54,952.47 for the purchase of the lift system, including shipping and delivery to the Public Works Yard, as well as setup of and training on the system. I would entertain a motion to approve this expenditure.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, how were we doing this work in the past, if this is a new system? Were we laying on our backs and, or not me, but laying on the backs and sorting it out? Thank you.
Mr. Cotta, can you answer that?
Yes, and yes, Member Mucci, that's essentially what's being done. There are some vehicles that, some larger vehicles where that's not even possible, so we end up with some ad hoc lifting solutions. You know, the guys have put planks down and drove the vehicle up on the planks to give them enough clearance to get underneath. But it's a fairly inefficient process of, you know, sometimes we do that, sometimes they have enough room to slide along the floor on their backs, and it's not, you know, it's not efficient, it's not really as safe for the workers to work that way as opposed to having something up, you know, up overhead.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Cotta while he's on the line here?
Yes, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Member Kinsinger, I believe.
Yes. Chris, would this be, in your opinion, would this save you man hours over the long run if you had this type of equipment?
I think we're going to find that is the case. It'll definitely cut the time on some jobs, and it'll allow us to schedule jobs more effectively. So, yeah, what I'm finding and the feedback I've gotten from talking to other motor pool departments is that yes, definitely an efficiency gain by using these.
Yes, and Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a follow-up, a question to Chris.
Sure.
Chris, approximately how many vehicles will you be able to utilize on this lift?
You know, I don't have a count, but the larger trucks, maybe a dozen, but this lift will actually accommodate everything from an SUV-sized vehicle up to the largest wheeled vehicles we have. So essentially, it's not just something, you know, we'll use only for the bigger trucks. It can be used for pickups. It can be used for, you know, backhoe or whatever we need to lift. They're very versatile in that way.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other discussion by the Assembly? Chris, I have a question. So will this lift get, for instance, a dump truck high enough off the ground if you had to replace a rear end or a transmission or some piece of the running gear? Will it make it access to put the proper tool under there to lift that piece out safely? Because that doesn't sound like you can do that working on the ground.
Yeah, no, I don't know offhand. I don't think we could get a forklift under there. But as far as being able to swing under a cart or support apparatus for heavy components, yeah, it definitely gives you enough clearance to do that. It gives you lots of headroom, but you know, we don't do a whole lot of that really heavy duty component changing, but we do enough of it that yeah, this will be really helpful.
Okay, so this will be beneficial for like lubricant changes, oil changes, etc. as well.
Oh, definitely. It'll help out a lot on that. Yeah, it's going to be a big time saver on those jobs just because of the ease of being able to get under, drain the fluids. You know, right now the guys are dragging a tub underneath the truck, and you know, they fill it up and then they have to drag it out all on their back or crawling on their hands and knees, and this will be way faster.
Okay, and from reading your memo here, this will be split between 3 motor pool entities: Public Works, the Fire Department, and Power and Light, just for the people listening. So that's all I have. Any other discussion on this expenditure? If not, will the clerk call the roll?
Mayor?
Go ahead. Yes?
Just a comment. I imagine this is probably a good thing to purchase. If it wasn't, then these things would not be in every car repair shop in this country. So I think this would be a good purchase for these guys.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? If not, will the clerk call the roll on the purchase of a mobile call and lift system?
Jeff,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Dave.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, purchase of the mobile lift passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda under new business is replacement of Petersburg Police Department SUV number 56. Public Works Director Cotta is recommending replacement of the PD's number 56 SUV patrol unit with a 2021 Chevy Tahoe special service vehicle. The vehicle replacement was approved in the fiscal year 2021 motor pool budget in the amount of $52,000. The Alaska Sales and Service of Anchorage, using current State of Alaska contract pricing, has quoted $54,479 for the special service vehicle, and shipping is estimated at $1,265 for a total cost of $55,744. The police department's motor pool reserves have adequate funds to make this purchase. I entertain a motion to approve this purchase.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just, I guess, a question for the chief or Steve. What's the lifespan of these police vehicles? Thank you. If we don't know, we can.
This is Chief Kerr. I believe Chris could better answer that. I believe the normal span is, I believe we're replacing them after 5 years, is what I thought. Chris can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's typically, depending on the type of vehicle, 4 to 5 years, and we'll do an evaluation. And you know, it's not an automatic replacement. It's kind of like all of our replacements. We pull them in at that point and take a look and decide if they could be kept in service after that.
Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions from the assembly on this purchase of a new police car? Clerk, call the roll.
Taylor,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, under new business, item 15B. That brings us up to the top 3 federal priorities for 2022. The borough's federal lobbyists request the Assembly choose the borough's top 3 federal projects from our submitted fiscal year 2022 federal priorities list. Congressman Young will be allowed to submit a total of 10 projects for all of Alaska. The projects must be close to shovel ready with fairly accurate cost figures, and at least one of the projects selected by the Assembly should be transportation related. And we have been supplied with a list of the priorities that we sent to our lobbyists in Washington, D.C., and he's asking for a little bit of fine tuning. There was 12 total, and they want to knock it down to 3, with one of them being transportation. So how this process has happened in the past, I guess, is we need to have a motion for one of these priorities that we've already sent in, a group out of 12 of them, to pick one. So let's start with trying to pick a federal priority request for the number 1 position.
Mr. Mayor.
Member Lynn.
Yes, I move that we put the AD ramps of the South Harbor as one of the 3 projects.
Second.
Okay, addition of ADA ramps to the South Harbor at $2.2 million, and I would imagine that has already been fairly far along in the design process. I see Harbor Master Wolin is in the audience, but is that the case, Harbor Master Wolin?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Hey, it is. We have conceptual drawings, numbers, those kind of things for both ends of the harbor for this particular project, and have tried numerous times to go after state and federal money and have been declined. So anyway, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the update there. Okay, any other discussion on the addition of ADA ramps to be one of the top 3 priorities that we send to our lobbyists and basically the Congressman Young? I guess that's where we'll end up.
Yep, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Member Lynn.
Yeah, a couple thoughts on this is that also kind of indirectly works as also a transportation project, because it does move people in and out of town. And from a standpoint of, I think, safety, I think it's a pretty good project to put on our list, since it is so well, through the design phase and cost estimate. Thank you.
Okay, any other input?
Mr. Mayor?
And I believe the way, yes, this Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just a little, I don't know if the word's concerned here, but I'm a little confused on, I understand that we're looking for a transportation option or project, but, when we'll be talking about this, maybe we don't have to talk about it later, but, in February 22nd, when we sent this draft federal priority list back to Washington, D.C., we just said, yeah, sounds good. Let's send it through. Da, 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 da. And, I don't know what I was thinking, but, I honestly think we need to spend some time in trying to figure out what is our number 1 priority here. This list here is also encouraging the conversation about the work session with the hospital, because, when I saw this list and we just kicked it off to the federal delegation, I see the number 1 priority in healthcare is this renovation, replacement of the medical center, and, shovel-ready project for 16.2. And it's just, I want to make sure we're very clear that when we send stuff back to the congressional delegation, that it looks like we are working with a plan. We got the transportation, healthcare, environmental. It's got whale issues, critical habitat, the cruise ship impact in Southeast, and I just want to make sure that if all Congressman Young is looking for is a transportation project, then I suppose we could, that's 2.2 million for that, for the boat ramp would be okay. But, at one time we had talked about this airport bypass road up at the airport, and that was our number one transportation interest that we were going to do.
I agree. But this is just that we're narrowing it down to 3, and we're prioritizing them out of these 12 on the request of our federal lobbyist. So I guess at this point, that is what this discussion is. And Member Lynn made a motion to put the ADA ramps as one of the 3, and I was assuming this was going to be the number 1 project that we were voting on first. So we could have discussion on that. I know in the past these discussions have been quite lengthy. So we're going to vote on these when the discussion is over. So we have to, right now on the floor is discussion on the ADA ramps for the South Harbor.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
This is Steve.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, you could have 3 transportation projects submitted to Congressman Young. It's not limited to just one. It's just at least one needs to be transportation related. I wanted to make sure everybody heard that.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay, I was assuming that, but thank you for the clarification. Yes, is this Member Lynn?
Again, clarification. I was proposing this as one of the 3 projects. I wasn't necessarily saying number 3.
Or number 1. So I guess all we have to do is come up with 3. That's what our lobbyist is asking for. So I'm going to ask the manager, did our lobbyist suggest that we prioritize those 3 as well?
He wasn't worried about a priority of these 3, just that, and in fact, there wasn't really a set number. He said, 2 or 3 projects, they'll all go to Congressman Young. The transportation is important because the president is talking about a massive infrastructure project or infrastructure bill that would include primarily transportation-related projects, and he wanted to have that in hand that he can go speak to. So it's, again, as you mentioned yourself, the congressman gets 10 suggestions for the entire state of Alaska. So we'll be up against some pretty stiff competition, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. If it goes anything like the state transportation infrastructure plan. Member Mucci, did you want to add anything more? Right now, we're just talking about adding ADA ramps to the list of 3 projects that we will send back to our lobbyists to give to our federal delegation.
No, thanks. I'm good right now.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments by assembly members? And
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
if you, Member Tremblay.
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate what I brought up at the radio today, that this was also a project on the many list of things that could improve the visitor industry in town. And given that we are climbing our way out of a hole with that, this is part of that larger comprehensive plan, as well as connecting it with the dredging project. In a way, it kind of makes us look like we are actually focusing on a project as in the South Harbor. So that's why I'll be voting yes to include it.
Okay, thank you for that input. Any other input on ADA ramps? And I believe, I've seen some conceptual drawings on the north end of the South Harbor where the crane dock is, and I believe this is an addition of ADA ramps to the South Harbor. It's not going to be replacing the ones that are there, and correct me if I'm misspeaking, Lo. But so part of the idea was it would, when the cruise ships tied up the bottom of the dock, they'd have, this more gradual ramp for people to go up, and then we could potentially, the fishermen going up and down, they could use it as well, but it would lessen the bottleneck. So I'm
Yes,
in
you're
favor
correct.
of this.
We have conceptual drawings for the south end as well, but we're mostly concentrating on the north end, the crane dock end.
Okay, and now that we're having this conversation, it would actually be before the current ramp, so maybe there'd be a separate approach, walkways, so that get people off of the driving surface to access the crane dock as well. So I think it's a good idea. So I'll quit rambling. Any other discussion on the ADA ramps? If not, will the clerk call the roll for this to be one of our 3 priorities?
Jay,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Dave.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the ADA ramp will be one of the priorities of the 3 that we're going to send back to the delegation. So now I'd entertain a motion for a second project to be put on this priority list, shortened version.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we, as one of our transportation projects on the federal priorities, to put development and hard surface paving for the airport bypass road.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? My phone's going in and out. Has there been a second? If there's no second, that motion fails. So we will move on to another listed project. Is there anybody with a motion to send another project to Washington, D.C.?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, what I'd propose to do would be to combine number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5. All these are remote facilities. One at Banana Point, Blackery Point, Point Agassiz, Papke's, and then Kupernoff Island, or the dock at the community of Kupernoff. And we just call it expansion and improvements for docks and assorted facilities for remote maybe remote's probably not the best word, for local access facilities.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion's been made to combine 3, 4, and 5. I have no idea what there is no proposed cost for Point Agassiz. Papke's has been analyzed. Kupernoff has. So that's looking at 3.2. Probably, who knows what the Agassiz one will be. So we're looking at a request of potentially $4 million or more.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, excuse me, it'd be probably close to $6.4 million.
Including number 2.
Including number 2, sorry.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, I didn't. Okay, so it's 2, 3, 4, and 5?
Yes, sir.
So we're going to combine 4 of our previous priority list into one. That's your proposal here. Okay, so any other discussion on this combining these facilities into one request? I agree that they're all good ideas. I just any other discussion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, my reasoning.
We have a second.
Oh.
Member Lynn?
I defer to Member Ken Singer on that. I know he was waiting. I'd like to hear from him.
Mr. Mayor, my reasoning behind this is if the bill does pass the way it possibly is, there's going to be quite a bit of money, and every one of these docks and facilities need repair or replacement. And by lumping them all together, we might not necessarily get enough money to do all 4 of the projects, but my hope would be we'd get enough money to get maybe 3 of them. So I figure, if we have to prioritize, let's just call it, I believe Member Lynn had a good term, remote access facilities, because these are all really important for the transportation. I mean, we live on islands, And the way we get from one place to another is by accessing these docks. And if we can't access these docks, then that really makes it difficult for people that live outside of the city of Petersburg to get into the city of Petersburg. So I think it's important long-term for the community.
I agree with your rationale. Any other discussion on combining 2, 3, 4, and 5?
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Mayor.
Use the language. Member Lim.
Yeah, question for Chris. There was some work done on some plans in the south end. I don't remember whether they were for Banana Point or Blackberry Point or what was done. Is it possible to have Chris give us kind of where that is or whether it was done, what was accomplished?
Mr. Cotta?
Yeah, that was a while back, and it was preliminary plans that were developed for a floating dock system that would be installed beside the ramp. Those plans were developed by the Forest Service, and they weren't fully fleshed out because we had gotten thought we had some approval for some RAC funding to build that structure, and then someone at the Forest Service in Washington D.C. Quashed that idea, and so that's really about as far as it ever got with some concept plans, and those did not include any breakwater repairs or breakwater improvements. It was just focused on the floating dock system.
And the follow-up question, if I might, or two.
Sure.
Yep. Chris, on that, whether that was just for sport or fishery for commercial use, or would it also encompass any kind of commercial use coming from Wrangell or anything like that in those plans?
Well, it would have facilitated commercial use. I don't think that was the primary intent behind it, but that definitely would have been a benefit. It was, and I can't remember exactly how long it was, but it was intended to be basically a 3-season structure, and then would be hauled up upland in the wintertime and stowed. So it wouldn't have been a year-round thing, and it wouldn't have been primarily for commercial use, but it definitely would have had that benefit.
Thank you. Along with Member Kensinger's comments, that if with the ferry system, lacking a little service, something at the south end would be, I think, in the long term, going to be very, very important to keep contacting for commercial use back and forth between the communities. And so I think that a project like this would really help us in the long term. Thank you.
Any other discussion? So, Clerk Thompson, do we have this written down as combining 2, 3, 4, and 5 and calling it a marine access project?
Yes, I do, Mayor Jensen.
So that Assembly, that is how it will be presented if we vote for this to be our second of 3 proposals. If there's no other discussion, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes. Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Thank you.
So that marine access projects 2, 3, 4, and 5 off our former list is approved as one of the 3 priorities that we'll send back to our congressional delegation. Is there a motion to propose a 3rd priority?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would move that our 3rd project be the $16 million to make a hospital project shovel ready.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Member Lynn and seconded twice to make the final planning and project design to make project shovel ready of $16.2 million for the Petersburg Medical Center.
Yes.
Discussion.
Yes, if I could, Mr. Mayor.
Member Lynn.
Yeah, I have a couple reasons for putting that forward. And I know a lot of us have concerns about where we're going to go, but no matter what we do, having a shovel-ready project down the road that's already paid for would be very, very important, number one. Two, this particular project, it really benefits every person in this community. And three, that we really, if you look at the 2011 facilities condition survey that was done on this, we really do need to get some kind of a focus and move forward in one way or another. Thank you.
Any other discussion on this request?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor.
Member Stanton Gregor.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I would briefly just echo what Member Lynn said. This is a large project that has been in need for a long time. In terms of acquiring federal dollars when we go through this every year for our capitalist project list, I'm generally cautiously pessimistic that the federal delegation will allocate us money, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't keep banging our hands on the door for projects that are important for our community. And the hospital renovation / construction is, top of the line in terms of healthcare needs. So I will most certainly be voting yes.
Thank you, Member Stanton Gregor. Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this isn't just a transportation list. This is just our capital, this is our federal priorities list. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, this is Steve. Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
I'm sorry, I apologize. So the Assembly previously had said this is our federal priorities list, and this was sent to our federal lobbyist, who in turn submitted this to our delegation. Primarily, Senator Murkowski asks for this every year, so I don't know if Senator Sullivan gets it or Representative Young, but she definitely gets it. I got a call from our federal lobbyist that said, hey, guess what? They're reinstating earmarks in the House. Each House member can submit 10. So in our case, Representative Young can submit 10 for the whole state of Alaska, and give me 2 or 3 projects with at least one being transportation related, and we'll submit these to Congressman Young. So that's as much, as much guidance as I got. They're in a hurry because this came up pretty quick, and they want an opportunity to see the projects. In all likelihood, he'll come back with questions. Staff and I will have to flesh some of these out a little bit more, and the goal is for the lobbyist to kind of get in to see Congressman Young and try to sell these and position them in the best way to be able to fund potentially all 3 of them. We know that's not going to happen, but have them ready, have them have a chance to ask questions, have them kind of preview these with all 3 of the delegation, because the Senate is also going to be talking about earmarks, and so this will come back again. So having these in their hands where they have an opportunity for us to kind of expand some of these numbers and explain it to them so they can sell it on our behalf is what this is all about.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I guess another question I have?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. So if we vote to move this final planning and project design for a cost of $6.2 million, are we locking into a brand new facility, with a total cost of $84 million? Or does this $16.2 million give us the flexibility to decide what we want, or are we just, once we've committed to the 16.2 for this final plan and project design, then we are moving ahead with a new hospital that's going to cost 84 mil? Thank you.
Well, the way I read it is, this is just a request for 16.2 million. I think I see where you're coming from, and I don't know if I support this request, even though I voted, it was a unanimous vote to send all these 12 to the federal delegation. On the agenda, I believe it's the next item, we're going to talk about a work session with the hospital board, and where we want to go. And we're talking about, maybe amending the agenda that Member Lynn and CEO Hofstetter have presented to us. I think the chairman of the hospital board was involved in that conversation, as well as the manager. I think we might need a little bit more public input, and we'll have that discussion later. That's why I think asking for this might be putting the cart before the horse, in my opinion. I agree we need a hospital in Petersburg, a medical facility. So the likelihood of getting this money is, if you don't ask, you're not going to get it, but I would be skeptical, but that's just my input. So is there any other input on this request for $16.2 million to make the Petersburg Medical Center plans shovel ready? If I believe this would also develop the site and put utilities in. So if that is the case, then if we got the money, then I think you're kind of decided which way we're going to go. And I don't know if I'm there yet.
Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's my concern here. I think the plan here is to have a work session with the hospital and just to chat about, I think bottom line will be what the hospital board and the hospital would like to do regarding a facility. And by me voting for $16.2 million for a final plan and project design to make this thing shovel ready, I can't vote for it right now because I don't know what that money's going to be going for. If it's going to be going for, and I don't think it is, but if it's going to go for conceptual ideas about what we can do, maybe. But if this is just to go with a new facility, to purchase property up by the airport or the fire hall or whatever, and build a new facility, I'm not there yet. And I think the community has a lot of concerns. I'm hearing about them, and I'm sure everybody else is hearing about them. And I can't support this at this time. So I'd just like to get some clarification and maybe come back after this work session. And if we can all agree that that's our number one priority, to build a new hospital up by the airport, the entire assembly has to get behind it, because if we're not behind it, it's not going to go very far. And I just need some clarification. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Any other? Yes, is that Member Lynn?
Yeah, it was both myself and Member Tremblay, but I believe we have Mr. Hofstetter on the line. If, Debbie, do we? That I was going to say that he could explain what that $16 million included, if that would help.
Okay, but let's let Assembly Member Tremblay interject here, unless she wants clarification from Mr. Hofstetter.
I'd like that, please.
Speak or wait? Okay, Mr. Hofstetter.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're coming in very clear.
Yeah, so just for clarification, we're building off of the steps that have already been completed in the new, or at least in the replacement or the renovation of the new hospital. We finished the master planning that was supported by Denali Commission back in February of 2020, which we presented to the Assembly on December 9th of 2019, and then we also did a town hall for the community in February of 2020, right before we went into COVID, which certainly seems like a long time ago. The intent of this request is to move that project along. It does not lock us into a final design. The project request is to actually do the planning phase for finalized services, space requirements, staffing, research options for new hospital design, including a two-story structure or other, collect preliminary geotechnical information necessary for final site selection. So the site selection, preliminary geotech, environmental study, finalize the space program, which is incomplete, and a conceptual design for the project. So it doesn't mean you're obligated or into a product that was done by the master planning, which is the $80 million that Assembly Member Mucci is referencing. And that budget of that $80 million is actually turnkey. So that includes FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment, in addition to all the elements behind it, including site prep and final design, architect, construction, and the implementation of the equipment. So it's the only way to get a project of this size and weight done is in a phase approach. And so the idea is to move this to the next phase in including all the elements that the Assembly has brought up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hofstetter. Member Tremblay?
Thank you. I think Mr. Hofstetter just did a great job of explaining why it's so important. I feel we have this on the federal priorities list. We as a community were told basically through that survey a decade ago that this was something we needed to take seriously, and we have a potential funding source to get us closer to that step. So I think that he just laid out in great detail why we need this on the priorities list. Again, this is a pie in the sky conversation a little bit, but it is also helping hopefully the public to understand so that we all have a lot of these questions, but frankly, a lot of those questions won't have answers until we get to this stage of the project. So I know I'm not willing to imagine a community here without a hospital. So this is the question of how do we get to that next step? So I'll be voting yes.
Any other comments from Assembly members? And I have a question of the manager. So we're proposing to have a work session with the hospital board, and we'll see what comes out of that work session. If we put this on the list, and if we got, our request got accepted, we don't just show up with a check. We have to vote to take this money? Or does the public have to vote on this, or is this just an Assembly decision at this point?
Mr. Mayor, I have no idea. I hate to sound ignorant. I mean, we like I said, we got a call from Sebastian that said, "Give me 3 projects really quick." My guess is there's a lot of chance to change our minds, for the Assembly to change its mind, or say, please drop a project off the list, or add one on even. They haven't done earmarks in the House for 20 years, 15 years, and they're still trying to come up with the rules that they're going to follow. And the Senate hasn't even started on it, and nothing's really going to happen until both groups agree to it. You have, in addition, the president's announced an incredibly large infrastructure plan. Again, the details aren't there yet. I think there's going to be a whole lot of people asking these same questions. So I wish I could give better advice, but I don't know enough right now. So I think if you put the project on the list, it's on the list. If you change your mind later and take it off, or don't put it on the list, and you decide after the work session you want it on the list, we can beg and plead and probably get it back on. So, but again, that's me talking. That's not the lobbyist.
Right. Well, the lobbyist works for us. If we ask him to put it on or take it off at a future date, I suppose we could. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Okay, this is, yes, this member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess I just need a little bit of clarification. With this ask, is this something that the hospital board has signed off on, that they want us to do this? Or I'm just trying to sort out how the protocol works here, is that we're just given our green light to do this, and whatever the hospital board, I don't know how the hospital board feels about this. I'm just kind of curious how this whole process works. Thank you.
Mr. Hofstetter, has the hospital board addressed this issue?
Yes.
Okay, so obviously they're...
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor?
It's why I was hired. But
right.
But yes, I mean it's been discussed for many often. So this is highly supported by our board.
Okay, thank you. That's what I needed to know.
And just an FYI, the laughing and everything is in the assembly chambers or on any speakers coming over the airways here. So anyway, if there's no more discussion, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Dave?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that will be our third and final item on the revised capital priorities list with a 5-2 vote with Member Mucci and myself, Mayor Jensen, opposed. So I think we're done setting up our capital priorities list, if I'm not mistaken. So we will move on to the next item on the agenda, and Assembly/Hospital Board work session. Assembly Member Lynn requests to schedule a work session with the Assembly and the Hospital Board and amendment and or approval to the draft work session agenda, which is attached. So I'd entertain, Member Lynn, I don't know if we need a motion to, let's do it formally. Entertain a motion to schedule a work session with the hospital board and potentially modify the proposed agenda. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and a second. So what we've got here is, Member Lynn, would you like to give your thoughts?
I would, thank you. Mr. Hofstetter, the chair of the board, Jared Cook, and the manager and myself sat down and had a pretty long discussion about what we needed to talk about in our annual meeting. And the reason I put this on here as an item and asking for approval, I want to make sure that we have included in here all the concerns that the assembly members would really like to talk about and make sure that we address. I know we can't make any decisions in a work session, but I really would like to get into, in some cases, into the strong details of what we, where we need to go and see if we can at least build some consensus from there. And with that, I will open that. If you want to make any changes, any additions, you, by all means, if Debbie would grab those. The hospital board will also get to see this, I believe, Thursday night. So it will be a joint, and then after that, schedule a meeting.
Okay, any other input from assembly members on the proposed agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor?
Work session. Yes, Member Kinsinger.
Yes, no, this would be not having been on the assembly when a lot of these plans were worked up, and I know they've been going on for many years. I would find this quite helpful, so I would definitely like to see this happen.
As I would. I think it's overdue. And then from the work session, maybe we'll have some kind of an action item by the assembly at a future date. We'll see how the work session goes. Any other discussion? I know there is concerns. I'd let any other assembly member speak before I voice my opinion or ask for something else to be added to this agenda.
Mayor?
Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, like several people have expressed, it's a big commitment. I appreciate what the hospital is doing and what their vision is here, but it's a big commitment to this community to ask us to help them put together this facility. I have a lot of questions, as I'm sure everybody else does, and I just want to make sure that when we come out of this work session that we all have a better understanding of what we're trying to accomplish here. And I don't know if we can come up with the final how we're going to pay for something like this, but I think there's some heavy lifting that needs to get done by the hospital board and the hospital administrator to kind of help me understand the need for something as expensive as this is. So I'm looking forward to learning more about the project and working with the hospital board. Thank you.
Any other assembly members have comments? Okay, I would, I can't make a motion, but I would suggest that in this conversation, we invite input from privately run hospital organizations as well. I understand that with our charter now, we can't put out an RFP, request for proposals for people to build a hospital in town. One of my concerns is, and this will come up again in this work session, and this has been, I've talked to a few local people that have the same feelings as me. We all realize we need a medical facility, a functioning medical facility in Petersburg. If we were to go forward with this and the medical center got the grants or whatever they needed to build this facility, it's still, if the facility was to financially fail, which no one would hope, the burden would be put back on the citizens of the community. So I think we have to have a broad discussion and see all of the options that are available to Petersburg. Like I said, I can't make a motion, but I would like to have some kind of a discussion on this agenda for our work session to discuss private entities potentially having a hospital in Petersburg.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to this conversation, and it looks like we will be discussing both economic viability as well as the locally owned and managed versus outside owned and managed conversation. So I believe we'll be touching on that conversation for sure, and I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, I see that. So, yeah, I just wanted to...
Mr. Mayor?
Any other... Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm trying to understand where you're coming from here. So are you suggesting that we have outside entities similar to Peace Health and Search make a presentation during this work session?
Well, maybe not during this work session, but from this work session, maybe potentially something like that could happen. I believe the hospital board has already had a conversation with Search. I don't know if they have with Peace Health, but I think all options need to be discussed, and it looks like they are. Member Tremblay's correct. Value of discussions of funding, value of locally owned and managed facility versus run and owned by an outside entity. So I guess that would be the discussion that would clarify my concerns. Because that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor?
Member Lynn.
I somewhat agree with you that I think there's so many pieces to this puzzle that I think we got to chomp on the first piece and then we can take on the second piece. And I think down the road, I may absolutely be in your camp that we need to look at something, broader or something else. But I think at first we need to all make sure we have the same set of information and that we're all operating somewhat, we are headed for the same goal, so to speak. And so, yeah, with that, I think you've got a good idea. Thank you.
I agree. So now we just have to come up with a date. I will be I'm just throwing my schedule out there since I've got the floor here. I will be available late April through May. So anybody have a date you would like to put out there? Sooner than later is probably better, but I will not be available till after the 20th of April.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Member Mucci.
Yeah, I can make myself available, one way or the other, but, I would like, through the city managers, to get the final master plan review, something that I could look at sooner than later. For whatever the hospital has, I want it sooner than later. I don't want it the week before the meeting. I want to see what they have ready to go, so that when I show up at this work session, I have looked at the documents for what they're thinking. And I don't know how we get that. I'm sure Steve or somebody can get it for us, but I'll be available whenever we decide to have one.
Mr. Mayor?
Member Tremblay.
Yep, speaking for myself and scheduling, I will be unavailable mid to late April, so either before or after would work better for me, and I can make myself available to be here.
Okay, well, I will be out of town, and this is, hopefully by then, we will be safe enough where we could have this meeting in person, even if we have to have it in a large conference room. I think it would be important. I'm glad there's 4 members in the assembly chambers, and hopefully we stay at yellow, and I don't know if we'll get the green anytime soon, but we'll just have to see how the hospital board and everybody feels about the meeting. It could be by Zoom, I suppose, or some sort of meeting like that as well. But yeah, so it's up to the assembly when they would pick a date. I would think maybe shoot for the last week of April. Does that work for everybody? Probably a evening time work session, and I don't know if this would be something that we probably wouldn't take public comment on, or at the time, but it'd be hopefully recorded, and the public needs to be able to have full access to the dialogue. And I agree with Member Mucci. It'd be nice to be able to look at the plans and the other, the follow up to the assembly meeting work session on the December 9th of 2019, and the town hall January 2020. I went to that. So final master plan review. It'd be nice to have those documents available to all of us involved. So with that being said, I don't have a calendar in front of me. Is everybody okay with late April for this work session?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Member Stanton Gregor.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I think there'll probably be some moving parts in coordinating with the hospital. Perhaps if it's agreeable to the assembly, we could agree that the last week in April, we'll shoot for an evening meeting and have Clerk Thompson coordinate with the hospital and its representatives to come up with a workable time, because I can be made to be available in the evening of any days that week. Again, if that pleases the assembly, that could be one approach to get the ball rolling for us.
That's acceptable to me.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Member Kinsinger.
Yes, I'm available. I just didn't know whether, and okay, I guess Assembly Member Tremblay said she was available also that last week. So yeah, I suggest that we concur with or we consult with the hospital board and see if that week works with them.
Okay, I'm looking at, since I couldn't access my calendar, I'm looking at the side book since I'm sitting on my boat here in Craig. Our first meeting in April is the 5th. Our second meeting in April is the 19th. And Member Tremblay, I believe I heard you right. You will be here the last week of April?
I will be back, weather cooperating, the 26th from Warm Springs.
What day? The 25th?
26th, roughly-ish. So let's say Tuesday onward, count me as attending.
Well, why don't we give it another day if it's all right with the assembly? Does a Wednesday evening work? That would be the 28th. And then as long as that works, we'll just see if it works for us. And then we'll have the clerk Member Stanton Gregor said, work the fine details out with the hospital board.
Sounds good.
Okay, so I guess we will take a vote to have this work session potentially on the 28th of April, and we'll go from there. So if there's no other discussion, will the clerk call the roll?
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Looking forward to it. Communications. We have had numerous communications since March 5th. They're all on our website. They're on tonight's agenda. So if people want to see what kind of communications we've been receiving from the public, they are accessible to you. Assembly discussion items. Upcoming landless legislation. Assembly Member Mucci requested discussion regarding upcoming landless native legislation. Member Mucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like everybody else on the Assembly, we've been getting letters from folks asking us to support last year's legislation. And, I say thank you to the folks that are sending me notes, but it's really hard for me to respond to stuff that I haven't seen yet. I've heard at the last work session, public hearing, that cabins were taken off of maps, and I hadn't seen that officially. And I'm trying to sort out when the borough, I've got a list of stuff from July of 2020 that Liz Cabrera put together for us, and I don't think we've had responses yet from the congressional delegation, as well as, I've got 2 pages of questions of the original document that came out in November of 2020 that, I think they're just legit questions that need to get addressed. And should we just turn the letters? How should I deal with my concerns with this legislation? Should I just write my list down and send it to the clerk, and the clerk could compile all the questions that the Assembly has and then send them off? I don't know when the legislation is coming out, but we got kind of surprised in October, November of last year when this legislation kind of steamrolled towards the end of the to the session, and that we didn't really have much time to operate. We just said we just need more time, and this is the time to do it. And so, eventually we'll have a public hearing on it, I imagine. But in the meantime, how do we get our concerns, or my concerns, as an Assembly member, how do we collate all this information? And I don't know if anybody has an answer for that, but that's my question, and that's why I have it here. I'm a little frustrated by that.
Is there any other input on this discussion item? And then I can interject my thoughts. Well, I thought, at this point, Member Mucci, I have some concerns too, and you did say something, when we had the work session that we had six people call in, and Mr. Will Ware has said that in his comments that they had taken forcing his cabins off of the land selection off the maps. Well, I talked to Sherry Klein, Senator Sullivan, and Murkowski's representative in Ketchikan. That's the first she heard of it. So it'd be nice to get accurate, current information. And we had to ask in the last legislation, 116th Congress, if the lands were selected, but it didn't say anywhere in there specifically about the cabins being ownership being turned over, as well as the administration site in Portage Bay. And I'm just talking about those pieces of infrastructure because they're in our backyard. And they said yes, but now, from Mr. Ware's comments, that they were taken off. So yes, there is some clarification that needs to happen. What I was told what we were told in the conversation with Senator Murkowski's staff, I can't recall the lady's name right now, but late May or early June was when they planned on reintroducing this legislation. So if that's accurate, then I would say sometime between now and then we need to compile all the information that we have received and discuss it as an assembly, decide if we're going to take a position or not. And I'm going to use the city of Craig as an example. I was talking to their manager, and he said during the last, Congress, 116th Congress, Craig came up with a position that they would prefer that the native group from Ketchikan selected land around Ketchikan and not on Prince of Wales. That was their official position that they put in at the last, Congress. So that is still their position today. So maybe we need to look at some of the concerns that we've had local residents. Mr. Stratman was concerned about a couple of pieces of property down the Narrows that he wouldn't be able to access. So maybe we need to come up with a position from the borough. So that's where I think we're at, Member Michi. And your list of concerns as a citizen, I suppose you could send them off to Sherry Klein in Ketchikan, and she would send them on to Senator Murkowski, etc. But there are some questions. So that's my input. Any other discussion on this matter?
Yeah, Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Just a quick clarification there. Every person in the tribe has said over and over and over and over again that they are not blocking people access to the land. You just said that our crab biologists would not be able to access that land, and that is flatly not true.
Okay, well, we'll have that in an official, this is just discussion. We're not taking any action, but thank you, Member Norheim.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned the example of Ketchikan and Craig. Our lobbyist, Sebastian, he made it sound in some of the correspondence we've had with him, that if we didn't like the lands that were selected, that perhaps we could work together to find lands that were acceptable to both parties. And I know that's going to upset some folks, but his response was, this is the time to find lands that you can all agree on. If there's issues, maybe they're not, we can't get past them, but his counsel was just to kind of, this is the time to do it. If we have some concerns about lands over at Thomas Bay and Agassiz and the cabins, this is the time to get those things out there so that that can be at least discussed. And I want to support this. If there was an inequity in the past, I want to do that. But I think these are concerns that need to get addressed, and the sooner we do them, it's going to take a long while to get to the bottom of a lot of this stuff. And if we're going to support it or not support it as an assembly, I have to have my concerns kind of addressed. But yeah.
I think we all do at some point, and I hope we will, I intend to have a discussion if there's any concerns that we want to support the letters, comments that we've got for this, against this, change the land selection. I agree. I've had conversations with Sebastian O'Kelly, our lobbyist, as well. And, like in my mayor's report, we're still, accepting email concerns on this issue. It's March, we've got April and May. So if we got some more time to compile concerns, in my opinion. So is there any other discussion on this matter? Okay, then we have another discussion item.
Yes.
Daycare and food assistance funding. Was there an interjection on the last discussion item? Does someone want to comment? Okay, we'll move to the next discussion item. Daycare and food assistance funding. Assemblymember Mucci requests a discussion on funding ideas for daycare and food assistance in Petersburg. Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought I'd have more information to share with the Assembly tonight, but I don't. But there's going to be a teleconference later on in the week, possibly to talk to a group in Seward that has a kind of an umbrella program for community assistance for daycare programs. So I'll hope to have a report back at the next meeting. Thank you.
Many other Assembly members have input on this topic.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Member Tremblay.
Yeah, just wanted to thank Member Mucci for bringing this up, and I'm looking forward to hearing what might be happening in Seward. I also wanted to reiterate that SHARE does have a survey going for folks who have been impacted by COVID. You know, we had the daycare assistance, and kind of, I think it's an overall economic wellness survey about how COVID impacted folks and in what ways the government might be able to help. And I hope that could be a good opportunity too for people to let us know. I know the daycare program did offer important assistance to families, but it's nice to get a retrospective before we look ahead at what might be coming to us. That's still a big question mark. And so I just want to thank SHARE for their work connecting with individual members in our community. And I plan to be attending the meeting on Thursday to hopefully hear how their conversations are going and be able to bring that to the Assembly too.
Okay, thank you. Any other Assembly members have any input on the discussion item, daycare and food assistance funding? Okay, we'll move on to the next discussion item. Assemblymember Mucci requests a discussion regarding the Borough's fiscal year 2022 federal priorities with regard to the Petersburg Medical Center. Member Mucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we've discussed this earlier, so I have nothing else to add here.
Okay, yeah, we did talk about it a little bit. That's good, Bill. Assembly member comments. Are there any comments by Assembly members this evening?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Member Tremblay.
Thank you. I just wanted to, first of all, thank the callers who called in tonight, especially Ms. Kahn, Hasbrook, including her letter, Ms. Kawashima, and Ms. Hunter regarding the anti-discrimination ordinance. Just wanted to remind everybody that federal anti-discrimination laws on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, and age are already on federal books. The Juneau policy added familial status, sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. Juneau also has a Human Rights Commission, which is dedicated towards the education and development of implementation of those policies. The question that I have is if a local ordinance that I would like to look into, is if a local ordinance would do anything to change enforcement or implementation of those federal laws, because the city and borough of Juneau refers people to the federal and state enforcement mechanisms. And so to me, that's kind of the question at hand as we build a better community together. So that was my first comment. My second was, this is my first meeting back in the Assembly chambers for a year, as I'm fully vaccinated now. And I wanted to mark it because a year ago, I was in an informal quarantine upon returning home from travel from Texas, California, and Washington. And that was a full week before the state of Alaska had any form of travel mandate. And so as we think about the town hall that we just had on our the state of COVID and hearing from the state of Alaska and hearing that our vaccination rate is 65% for adults 16 and up in the community. It's really important and really remarkable that we're at that stage this early. As they use the term, the tinder that's here for continuing outbreak is still there. And so I just wanted to remind folks about the vaccination clinic coming up in April. If you are receiving your first dose of a 2-dose regimen on that April date, your vaccination activation, your supercharge, comes around Mayfest or Little Norway Festival. And so if you feel like starting summer off in a safe way as we all try to get our summer going in a way that keeps us economically strong, that's a really great way to do it. So I just wanted to celebrate this moment and thank everyone for all the patience with all the teleconferencing this whole time.
Okay, any other assembly members have comments on any topics this evening?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I need a point of clarification, I think, for the next meeting, and I expect that to come from either the city manager or the city clerk. If an assembly member is answering questions or responding to questions as a member of a group, do they need to clarify that at the beginning of their statement? And when an assembly member is responding to somebody who has written a letter as an individual, if an individual on the assembly calls them out for where they're working or what their job is, I mean, I want to make sure that we're just talking about individuals and not people and their professional jobs. So I'm just trying to sort out, as we go down this landless legislation, if I, as a member of a group, if I'm not speaking as an assembly member, but I'm speaking as somebody who's representing a group, does that need to be addressed right up front so that we know that that person is speaking as an assembly member and not as a member of an organization? And I don't know if we need to address it tonight, but it certainly can be. I'd like to have it discussed at the next meeting. Thank you.
Well, yeah, but it's too late for the discussion of it tonight, but sounds like you should talk with the clerk and or attorney potentially. So, any other assembly member comments this evening?
Yes,
Okay,
Mr. Mayor.
Member Norhan.
I just wanted to urge people that, if you were on the fence about getting the vaccine for whatever reason, you should probably just go do it. I understand some people are worried about the first ones that came out, the one where you get 2 shots, and that's fine. It's new, and new things can be scary. But the Johnson & Johnson one is apparently the old style of vaccines, and I don't think the fears about what's going to happen if you get the vaccine is really founded well. For example, I would have preferred to get the 2-shot one. Obviously, I'm in Sitka, and I don't know how long I'm going to be here, so I had to get the Johnson & Johnson one, the single shot. The next day I didn't feel awesome, but I didn't feel horrible. Honestly, I just took 2 ibuprofen and went about my day like everything was fine. I think it would be irresponsible not to, in my opinion. And I think it would just be better for everybody, the whole town's health. At least, we're at 60% around there. If we could get that to at least 80, 90, 100 would be wonderful. But I think you should look closer at the people who are telling you don't get these shots. Look more into what exactly they're using to support those arguments, because I just can't find any real evidence that it's the end of the world. And for those of you who think, okay, well, it's, COVID's not going to kill me, that may be true, but there's a very real chance you could lose your sense of taste and smell. And that was actually the biggest driver for me, because I'm not worried about that it was going to kill me, but I really enjoy, tasting tacos and stuff. So I went ahead and got it, and I don't see the downs. I'm short as I think you should go get it. I don't think there's any real evidence that it's going to be the end of the world and you're all going to die or something if you go get the shot. That's absolutely ridiculous thinking. Thank you.
Any other assembly members have comments this evening? Okay, moving on to recognitions. Are there any recognitions this evening?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Member Tremblay.
Yes, once was not enough. Thank you, Clerk Thompson, for the work you put in on behalf of this community. It is tireless, and I do not take it for granted. So can never be enough times to say thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Mr. Mayor?
Any other recognitions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, is that member?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to recognize Debbie Eddy and KFSK for that report they put in this morning about Debbie Eddy coming down with COVID. It was a very honest and very open conversation about how it all came about with her, and it was really eye-opening for me. I really appreciate it. It was very brave of her to step up and do that, and yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for doing it. We hear all kinds of negative stuff from time to time, and that was just a ray of sunshine for me when I was going out the road this morning. I just wanted to say thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor?
Other assembly members? Yes.
Yes, I'd also like to thank Debbie for constantly answering my numerous questions that I pepper her with throughout the week and her many years of service. And then I'd also like to give a recognition to Joe Bertinoli, who's worked tirelessly. And when I was on planning and zoning, he was very humorous. It was like the high point of the meeting was looking across the room and seeing Joe on the other side. And it made sometimes a very tedious process enjoyable. So he'll be missed, his expertise, and hopefully he stays in the community.
All right. Any other recognitions from assembly members or staff?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I would just like to thank Shaylin up at the Manor for doing a good job and keeping all the old folks up there safe. It's been really appreciated, and thank you, her and her staff, of course.
Okay, any other recognitions before I entertain a motion to go into executive session? And when we do that, I guess we'll have to let the operator know that we're done, but we need a motion to go into executive session to discuss the PMEA negotiations with the manager and the clerk.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Okay, call the roll on this, please, Debbie.
You bet. Bob?
Yeah.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go into executive session. So, Chris, the operator, the meeting is over, the regular assembly meeting. And before we hang up on this line, does everybody have the other number to call into the executive session? I guess that would be Jay, Taylor, and I. I've got the number.
Let's see here.
I also have the number. I believe that he sent it.
Okay, the clerk can text it to you. If not, probably want to say it over the radio.
Yeah, Debbie, could you send it to me?
Will do, Jay.
Thank you kindly.
Okay, so can we start that meeting like at 1 or 2 minutes after